sometimes they're brutally honest and they're like, hey, nerd, what are you going to tell me? You read this stuff in a book. And so I tell them my background. I was an all DELCO player at Strathaven. I unfortunately played with Brian at Millersville. Did pretty well there. Just got into the Hall of Fame at Millersville. And then I played professionally in Ireland for a little bit. Once I got done that, I've been a teacher and a behavior specialist at the Interborough School District for 20 years now. 3 of those years I coached at Strathaven, JV and assistant varsity with Mike Barr. We won a state championship. And for the past 17 years, I've been the assistant men's coach at Swarthmore College. And once I tell that to clients or coaches that I'm working with, it kind of, their guard comes down a little bit, because the reality is the things that you guys as coaches are experiencing, I've gone through. The things that your players that you're coaching are going through, I experience all that to some degree. So the information that I'm going to share with you isn't just clinical, real good, sound information. It's also information that I know for a fact can help you, whether you're a player, a coach, or a parent. I wanted to start with, though, how bizarre it is that I'm giving a presentation in a T-shirt in my guest room. With what's going on with the coronavirus. I was talking to Stephanie a little bit about it through all of our emails. Nothing's normal right now. And a lot of people are struggling with anxiety. Anxiety comes out of the unknown, fear of the unknown. And that's exactly what we're living through right now. And, there are other factors that, as soccer coaches and players and board members and parents that we're dealing with, the developmental academy shutting down, uncertainty of tryouts, all that kind of stuff. This is a real perfect opportunity for anxiety to become problematic. And that anxiety has to be the biggest issue that I help athletes deal with. Most athletes come to me because they're playing at an elite level, but they're not playing up to their potential. They're elite players, but their confidence is shot and their anxiety is high. And so I wanted to use the coronavirus thing to explain a concept that I think it tells why we're so quick to engage in what's called catastrophic predictions. When things don't go well, whether it's the coronavirus and business is shutting down and homeschooling your kids, we're so quick to go to the worst case scenario. Prime example, toilet paper shortage. Why? Because anxiety started to creep in, and then panic buying started to settle in. But this concept also applies for the athletes that we work with all the time. They miss an open net, all of a sudden their negatively hardwired brain takes over, and there's a reason for it. From an evolutionary standpoint, our brain is hardwired to resonate more with bad experiences than it is with good experiences. So go back millions and millions of years, you have 2 Neanderthals out in the wild. Neanderthal A has kind of a weird happy-go-lucky brain that's rare. Neanderthal B has a brain that's kind of like ours, negatively or wired for negative experiences. They both have the same experience of getting bit by a rattlesnake. They both nearly die, but luckily they live. Neanderthal A doesn't think about that experience over and over again. It's like, that felt terrible. I experienced pain. I almost died, but I didn't. I'm good, and moves on with life. Neanderthal B, every detail of that experience he relives over and over again and thinks about almost obsessively. All those details of that experience get burned in his brain. Time of day, location, weather, season, the sound of the rattle, the color on the snake's back, the pattern, all that stuff gets burned into his brain. And then 6 months later, they're out in the wilderness again, same experience. Neanderthal B doesn't even think about it, puts the pieces of the puzzle together very quickly and takes off running. Because he hears that little bit of a rattle and just fear kicks in and he goes off running. Neanderthal A doesn't think about it, doesn't get too scared, gets bit by that snake and dies. And over the course of millions of years, those happy-go-lucky brains die off because it doesn't help them survive. So that negatively hardwired brain, whether it was a rattlesnake or or the crops dying, or rival tribes coming to take over your land, all those negative experiences resonating with those Neanderthals helped them live. And as a result, they were the ones to pass their genes on. And here we are stuck with those negatively hardwired brains. The good thing is our environments aren't so scary, but we still cling on to anxiety. And you guys see this all the time with your athletes. Your player might be the best player on the field, and they make one mistake and they fall apart completely. That's that negatively hardwired brain. So a quote that I came across that is, I think, going to be really helpful. Great book if you have time. Some of us have more time now. I know Brian's been posting a lot on Facebook, the different books that he's reading. The Coddling of the American Mind. It was really enlightening to me. It was written by one guy was like a psychologist and sociologist. The other guy was a lawyer. And it basically talks about things like safe spaces on college campuses are doing more harm than good. But one of the quotes that came out of it from Buddha was, nothing can harm you as much as your own thoughts unguarded. And so the idea there is our thoughts are going all the time. And let me see if I can change slides. Because the first thing I really want to get into is cognitive behavior therapy. So CBT is really widely accepted. Research supports it well. I'm a firm believer in it. I use it whether a client's coming in for panic disorder, depression, anger problems, or it's one of my athletes. And the way it works is, as the graphic shows, you have thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And all three of these things are constantly interacting with one another. So whenever I get a new client on my whiteboard, I put this kind of graphic up and I ask them, how good are you controlling your behaviors? And most of my clients are like, oh, really good. Never get sent to the principal's office. I'm not getting in fights. Every once in a while I act out of character, but pretty rare. I said, how good are you controlling your feelings? Clients are saying, well, it's kind of why I'm here. I'm okay from time to time, but I'm feeling down or I'm getting overwhelmed easily. I said, so you've got really great behavioral control, okay control of your feelings. I say, what about your thoughts? How good are you at controlling, or even better, managing your thoughts? And I either get a blank stare because the client is really like, I've never even thought about managing my thoughts. Or I get the standard answer of, I have no control. My thoughts are what they are. They just come and go and there's nothing I can do about it. So cognitive behavior therapy in the beginning really focuses on getting to understand your thoughts better. I did a random Google search years ago, said how many thoughts per day, and I don't know how anyone would ever measure that, but they said anywhere between 12 and 70,000 thoughts a day. So at the high end of that spectrum, that almost comes out to a thought per second. And imagine an athlete who had a rough game, and for the next 3 days, they're obsessively thinking about that game. And all of those thoughts are negative. They're already feeling down. They're already lacking confidence. They're already anxious about the next time they step on the field. If all those thoughts are going on and on and on, well, then all of a sudden that lacking confidence bottoms out even more. That high anxiety skyrockets. And how does that manifest on the field? Tentative play, tense play, anger outbursts on the field, kids just refusing to go. And I've worked with parents who are like, yeah, after a bad game, I can't get my son or daughter to go to practice. So I think that this illustrates, it's pretty eye-opening to recognize how powerful your thoughts are. One of the ways I describe it to my athletes is, imagine if for the next week I followed you around every waking moment of the day. I followed you around. I was right by your side and I was talking trash, telling you how, nobody likes you and you're the worst player on the team and your coach thinks you're terrible. You're going to get benched next game. By the end of the season, you're going to get cut. And I say, how's that going to affect you? And it's really eye-opening. You're like, oh yeah, that's terrible. I would be awful. I said, the reality is, I can't do that, but you can't leave your own mind. So what I want to help you do is, number one, become more aware of these thoughts. And let me see if I can show you, because when you get into this, it comes at a tremendous risk, because anxiety is an uncomfortable feeling. Most people, when they feel it, they try and push it away. The problem is it's not going anywhere. It's still there. It's just kind of hidden. It's off in your periphery, but it comes out in other ways. It's why the symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder are irritability, difficult sleeping, can't focus, problematic relationships, eating poorly, lowered motivation. That's anxiety that's pushed away. It finds a way out. It finds a way to infect you. So when I have clients, I do this. I hold up a piece of paper and I say, solve this problem. So it says 3 + 2, and that's easy, 5. And then I turn the page over, and it's blank, and I say, solve this. And they say, I don't know. I said, guess. Like 5, nope, 0, no. Oh, the paper's white. The answer's white. Nope. They're like, they start getting frustrated. And they say, what's the point of this? And I said, that's you dealing with the anxiety now. You're pushing it away. How can you solve a problem when you don't know the details of it? And that's the risk of getting into therapy as an athlete, is that in the beginning, I want to make you really acutely aware of this anxiety and understand the details of it better, so that when you're on the field, you can be better at solving that problem. But at first, the anxiety is going to go up a little bit. But the other thing that actually, let me get into the next slide. All right, I got to move my Zoom thing around. So how can cognitive behavior therapy impact your game? How can understanding your thinking have that much of an impact? Negative thoughts are inevitable, but you don't have to grab onto it. So it's not about controlling your thoughts. It's about having a different relationship. My younger clients, the way I describe it is, is it like your thoughts are a bully in your head and they're bossing you around? And they'll light up. They're like, yes, that's exactly what's going on. I'm like, well, let's take the power away from that bully. If you start thinking some negative stuff, if you can catch it sooner and ground it in reality, you can move on from it sooner. So when you increase positive thoughts, confidence goes up and improved play happens. When players are in a bad place in their head, anxiety, sadness, frustration, anger go up, and that negatively affects how they perform on the field. And that little 80-20 ratio is something that you guys can just start introducing to your athletes right away. It's how do we self-reflect? And I think that most of the time, and I think I'm being a little generous when I say 80-20, it's probably more like 90-10. When we get done a game or a practice and we're reflecting, which is a good thing, but we tend to do it wrong, 80% of our thoughts are focused on those errors we make on the field. The time we got megged, the missed open net, the missed tackle, the missed pass, whatever, and we think about it over and over again. Maybe 10 to 20% of our thoughts about, the goal we scored or that crushing tackle or the air ball we won, the great save. And so I tell my clients, you got to switch that. You got to spend 80 to 90% of your self-reflection on the good stuff, 10 to 20 on the bad stuff. And I'll get sarcastic clients be like, oh, so I just have to think positive thoughts and everything's going to work. And I'm like, no, you do have to focus some attention on your weaknesses. You have to identify what you're not good at, but you have to do it in the right way. You can't do it in this negative way when you're beating yourself up. I'm going to get into cognitive distortions in a minute, which describes this, but take some time, take 5 to 10 minutes after each game in practice, identify the 1, 2, or 3 things that you started struggling with, and problem solve. Identify the problem, come up with a way to fix it, and then move on from it. That's that kind of short-term memory that all really good athletes have with their mistakes. And then think about those good things you did on the field, because number one, when you think about it over and over again, it becomes more of a concrete concept in your head, and therefore it's more likely to happen later down the road. But the other thing is, if you're spending a lot of time thinking about your success on the field, you're bolstering confidence, you're lowering anxiety, and then your play is going to be much better the next time you step out on the field. So the next line, how can you change, how can you respond to your emotions? How can you change that? I'm going to get into that Yorks Dodson graphic. I think I have that on 2 slides from now. I'll get into that in a minute. One of the things, problematic anger can become a helpful emotion. A little bit of controlled anger is actually really valuable on the field. It lets your players be a little more fearless, but it's a fine line to walk between anger that's motivating, pushing you, and anger that's out of control and causing red cards and embarrassing things on the field and dangerous, careless tackles. But the other thing, once you start managing your thoughts better, most important thing, improved overall performance. You focus more because that negative thinking starts to go away. That negative thinking, not only does it make you more anxious, it's a huge distraction. You become confident more, you increase your enjoyment. And so on this slide, I'll end on this concept. One of the things that I tell all of my clients is this. My two main goals. Number one is to switch the balance in the scale of anxiety and confidence, because most athletes come in high anxiety, low confidence. I want to switch the two of those things. And then the other thing is I have this print on my wall. It's a little kid, shorts, t-shirt, probably like 8 or 9 years old, full sprint, and his shadow is the Flash. And I point to that and I tell my clients, I'm like, that's ultimately what I want to help you do. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, what does it look like that kid's doing? And they're like, having fun. I'm like, yeah. If I can get you to have fun, it means you're really confident, your anxiety's low, and you're playing really well. And it doesn't matter if it's one of my club players who's in middle school, a college player, or a professional athlete that I'm working with. If any athlete can get to that level, if they're having that much fun, their play is going to be a lot better. And we see it on the professional level. I mean, you look at what Messi does on the field for Barcelona, the guy's a magician. How does he do for Argentina? Not so good. He's still amazing. The best example of this, the last World Cup, I want to say they were playing Nigeria. They're panning Argentina's team during the camera's panning across team during the national anthem. All of them hand over heart, belting it out. And what happens with Messi? They get to him, he's literally doing this and his hand's trembling. And that's an example of anxiety that's starting to spiral out of control because he's got Maradona watching him and he really has to carry this team and he's got all this pressure. Even the best in the world succumbs to this. I don't think he has that much fun when he plays for Argentina. That's why he's kind of thought about leaving there. Let me just see if there was anything else. All right. So the next slide, if I can get to it, there we go. So this example here is just two athletes who have similar experiences missing an open net in the first 5 minutes. Player A is the athlete with that normal brain pattern that they haven't really started working on yet. They haven't started to understand that the mental side of the game is huge. So they make a mistake, they feel embarrassed, they get angry, they get disappointed. Now here's the thing, I know I'm a good sports psychologist. That first step, that embarrassment, anger, and disappointment, I can't change that in the athletes that I work with. They're too passionate, they care too much. Mistakes hurt, that's normal. But then what happens is they get distracted with negative thoughts, negative self-talk, catastrophic predictions. Player B. They make the mistake, they feel embarrassed and angry, get disappointed. They dwell on these negative thoughts, feelings surrounding the mistake. They remain distracted, anxious, unmotivated for the rest of the game. For those of you who played the game, you've all been in this place before. You make one mistake, and for the next 10, 15, 20 minutes, or the remainder of the game, you're not yourself. You don't want the ball at your feet because you're afraid of the next mistake. And so he continues to make the mistakes because this cycle goes on and on. Whereas player B, they've gotten a better handle of their thinking. They make that mistake. They feel like crap for a brief moment. They have some negative thoughts and self-talk, but they recognize that it's over and done with. I'm going to deal with that later. I'm going to learn from this mistake. I got to move on from it. I know it's non-soccer, but to me, the best example of this, and I hate to say because I'm a diehard Eagles fan, Tom Brady in the Super Bowl a couple years ago when they were down, I think it was 28-3 to the Atlanta Falcons. Any other athlete would have fallen apart completely. But Tom Brady stayed focused in the moment, one play at a time. And so when you start to get better, and another main goal that I work with athletes on, failure is a huge part of our game. I mean, Swarthmore College, we had a good run in the NCAA tournament last year. We got to the Sweet 16. We had a really good team. Most of my guys, they fail more than they succeed on the field, and these are high-level collegiate players. Failure is inevitable. I want to help you learn how to fail the right way. It's going to happen. You know, just accept it and don't kind of dwell on it. So I say this is the Yorks Dodson Law. So if you look at this graphic, you know, you have the one axis that says performance, high and low, stress level, high and low. So in that green section is where I am with chess. I have no interest in chess. I don't think I know all the moves. My performance is going to be terrible, but if I play anyone in chess, I'm not going to care. It does not matter to me. When I was playing soccer in Ireland, I was more in the red area. Okay, so this is the story I tell a lot of my clients. When I was in Ireland, I went over there with a lot of negative thinking because in my head was, I'm just an American male soccer player. The females have dominated the international level. The males, not so much. We didn't even make the last World Cup. So I went there thinking, these guys think I stink because I'm just an American, and I didn't even play Division I. I was Division II. I don't belong here. I'm not good enough, and the guys on the team hate me. And so as a result, I still played well over there, but I was really unhappy because what was going on in my head was making me not like the game. And here I'm from the age of 5, if someone asked me what I want to do when I grew up, professional soccer player, easy. That's all I ever want to do. I'm living my dream. But what's going on in my head is making me miserable. And so as a result, I came home after 6 months. But here's the thing. The voice in your head's often telling you lies. So if I grounded those thoughts in reality and looked at it more objectively and said, wait a minute, I made the team and I started every single game. It's not like the coach said, oh, he came all the way from America, let's let him play. No, he was getting paid to do a job as well. And so I was missing reality. So I tell my clients, my athletes all the time, wait, you have these thoughts go on in your head, challenge them, ground them in reality. And so if I had that ability, I would say, wait a minute, no, my teammates do like me. I'm a starter. I'm one of the better players here. Let's see where this can go. So as you can see, when that stress level starts to rise, performance goes down. So the other thing is if you have that stress level in the middle, it's why a lot of my athletes are like, I just don't ever want to feel anxious again. I say, number one, I'm not a magician. It's a normal human emotion. I can't take it away from you. Number two, I don't want to. Stress and anxiety, if at the right levels, are good. They motivate you. They keep you focused. They keep you energized. That little bit of stress of not making, the team that you want to play for, not cracking the starting lineup is going to motivate you to go out and run 3 miles and get in the gym and work on your first touch and all of those things. So, anxiety is a tricky thing, but you don't want to get rid of it completely. You just want it to be your friend. All right, let me see if there's anything else. All right, so before I get into mindfulness, I want to talk just real quickly because I didn't put it in the slides. A big part of cognitive behavior therapy with my athletes is helping them recognize cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions are negative ways that our brain sees the world that are often very inaccurate. And there are many of them. If you just Google cognitive distortions, you can read up on them. But the big 3 that I deal with, number 1 is negative self-talk. All athletes do it, and all athletes come up with the same reason why they do it. I know I was guilty of it. I tell myself I suck, my left foot's not good enough, which Courtney can attest, it's not good enough. I'm too small, all that kind of. I thought that now that I look back on it, I wasn't thinking about this at the time I was playing. Now that I look back on it, I did that to try and motivate myself. And so I tell my clients, if I follow you around and talk trash and say the same stuff, is it really going to motivate you? And they're like, no, I'm actually probably going to want to quit. I'm like, yeah. So, and you can't leave your own voice. So why are you doing it? It's not helping you. So negative self-talk is a big one. Another real big one, this is probably the most important, catastrophic predictions. Most athletes, when they make one mistake, they go to worst case scenario. They miss that open net. Now all of a sudden, they're convincing themselves they're going to get benched. They're going to get cut. Everybody in the stands thinks they're terrible and they're never going to play the sport again. One reason why athletes do that is they feel like, well, if I think about this over and over again, number 1, I'll prevent it from happening, and number 2, I'll be prepared for it. So what I tell them is this. I say, think about it for 10 seconds and then move on from it. It's okay to be a little bit prepared for worst case scenario because it could happen and nobody likes to be blindsided. But when you think about it obsessively, if all you're thinking about is you're the worst player out there and you're just going to make mistake after mistake and you're going to get cut, confidence goes down, anxiety goes through the roof, and you lose motivation. And the last one, and this is really important for those players at FC DELCO because of the way their brain's developing, the adolescent brain, negative mind reads. Mind reads are when we think about what other people are thinking of us. So I'll use this as an example. If during this whole Zoom presentation, all I'm thinking about is how all the audience members are thinking, oh, this Dr. Dalton, he's such a nerd. He doesn't know what he's talking about. None of this makes sense. This is just such a waste of time. If I have all that going on in my head, I'm going to lose my place in the slideshow. I'm going to become too nervous. I'm going to start stuttering. It's going to affect my performance. And the reality is, some of you may be thinking that. I'm never going to know, but I'm the one creating that narrative in my head, and athletes do this all the time. And guess what? That narrative is often wrong. Yeah, if you make one mistake, your coach might be frustrated, but he's not going to cut you for one mistake. And that's what you're telling us. He's not going to think that you're a terrible player. So getting them to understand, because the reality is our sport is on public display. People are judging it. The issue, though, is we think people are always judging us real badly. And one of the reasons is we're our harshest critics. So we tend to believe other people are critiquing us in the same fashion, which isn't the case. So once I can get my clients to become more aware of these cognitive distortions and start to play with them a little bit, well, then all of a sudden it frees up their ability to play to the way they want. So cognitive behavior therapy is one of two main approaches that I use with all of my athletes, whether it's in my office or at Swarthmore College. The other one is mindfulness and meditation. And my younger clients, when I say this, I say, just bear with me. Be open-minded because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking Buddha picture, legs crossed, fingers out, home. Like, we're not doing that. Mindfulness is more geared toward American culture. So when I was at Rowan University, I did my pre-doctoral internship there. My supervisor said, Ciaran, you and the other interns are going to become mindfulness and meditation experts. And my first thought was negative. Oh, great, hippie psychology. This isn't for me. It's a waste of time. I like CBT, but I couldn't be rude. So I'm like, all right, I'll go along with it. 2 days into the training, it was one of those mind-blowing experiences. And all I thought about was, I just think about how much athletes sacrifice to become physically superior. They sacrifice social life, academics. They put themselves through tremendous suffering and pain to run and get in the gym and practice over and over. They do all this hard work to get their bodies to do what they wanted to do, and they ignore this part. So mindfulness for me was the equivalent of training your mind the way you train your body. And guess what? I've seen it for 17 years at Swarthmore College. We've had some real gifted athletes who recruited highly. We thought they were going to be superstars for it. We end up cutting them after their sophomore year because, yeah, they're talented on the field, but they can't handle the pressure. They fall apart easily. We've had other guys who are fairly average across the board, average speed, okay touch, decent in the air, good defender, and they go on to become All-Americans. Why? They've got this part figured out. So mindfulness, it's all about single tasking. So when I'm in front of a group of adolescents, I'll say, how many of you are really good at multitasking? Everyone puts their hand in the air. I'm like, you're all liars. None of you are good at multitasking. They've done research. There's like, it's less than 1%, and maybe even less than 0.5% of the population is what's known as super taskers, that they're able to multitask very well. The rest of us, we're terrible at it. So you think about the high school student who's sitting in their room doing homework. Music's playing, they're texting people, they're watching a TV show, they're having a conversation with one of their parents. Like, how are you doing with homework there? They're like, I'm all right. I'm like, but imagine this, that homework assignment takes you 2 hours to do and you get a 6 out of 10. If you eliminate all those other distractions and just focus on that one homework assignment, you'll get done in 45 minutes and you'll get a 9 or a 10 out of 10. So it's all about training your mind to ignore all the nonsense that's around them on the field and focus on that one play at hand. Not what happened in the first 5 minutes, not the end score of the game, what's happening in that moment. So they're all different kinds of exercises. You can focus on your breathing. You can look at something. The one that works best for me and most of my athletes is you put on a song. Close your eyes, sit in a comfortable chair, and you just listen to that song. And I ask my clients in the first session, I say, do you think you'd be able to just focus all your attention, not get distracted all on that song? And they're like, yeah, I think I could do that. I'm like, absolutely not. When I did my first mindfulness exercise at Rowan, I wasn't on board. I thought it was a waste of time, but I'm competitive. I'm like, I'm going to kill everybody at this. And we did a breathing exercise. There were 8 other therapists in the room with a lot of experience. I'm like, I'm going to be the best at this. 5 minutes of breathing. Within 2 seconds, I wasn't focused on my breathing anymore. My mind got hijacked. I was like, oh crap, am I the only one with their eyes closed? Because that's going to feel awkward. What if someone walks in right now? What am I having for lunch? What if I'm a terrible therapist and no one ever wants to come see me? That negative brain started to get hijacked. Our brain's so powerful, it's always working, and sometimes it works against us. So if an athlete's on the field and they're thinking about their girlfriend in the stand and what their coach is thinking about them and what their teammates think about them and that mistake they made in the first 5 minutes, they're going to be crap on the field. So you do these exercises over and over again. And one benefit is their ability to sustain focus goes from 2 to 5 to 10 to 20 seconds at a time. You get better at focusing it, which also has benefits in the classroom. But even more importantly, for me, I recognize when I first got into it, I would lose focus, and then for like 3 to 4 minutes, my mind would go, and then finally I'm like, oh, crap, I'm not focused on my breathing, or I'm not focusing on the song. So I did it over and over again, and that 3 minutes of distracted thinking became 2 minutes and 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 1 minute. And I'm at the point right now, let's say I make a bad move on the sideline at Swarthmore College, and I encourage Eric Wagner, the head coach, to sub someone, and they make a mistake and we get scored on. Early in my career, negative thinking the whole time. Coach Wagner's never going to ask me for advice during game day anymore. The players are going to be mad at me because we're going to lose this important conference game because of the decision that I suggested. It's going to be all my fault. Next 10 minutes, I'm not focused on the game. I'm lost in my head. Now if I make a mistake, all right, let me deal with that later. When I get home, I'm going to rethink that and see where my mistake is. But I got to focus on Hopkins or Gettysburg's defense right now to figure out how to break them down. So it teaches you how to catch your wandering mind a lot easier. Okay, so it allows you to become more aware. So some of the just basics of it, you want to sit in a comfortable position, but you want to be alert. Like a lot of people like, mindfulness is great. I fall asleep every time. I'm like, it's not actually the point. So you want to have a straight spine, sit in a comfortable position, but you want to be alert. And one of the other things you can do is while you do this, if you want to focus on one thing, focus on your body. Sometimes when we get stressed out, we figure out where we hold tension in our body. So for a lot of our athletes, they hold tension in their fists or their shoulders and their upper back, and that throws off their first touch. So those are the basics of mindfulness. And why is it helpful? So first, it can help in all areas of life. It doesn't matter whether your performance is on a soccer field, in the classroom, in your social life. It can be used across the board. Because I'll often get feedback from my athletes like, Ciaran, that really helped on the field, but man, it's a game changer when I'm taking tests. I used to think I'm going to fail, and then I would run out of time. Now I can laser focus on that test, and I got 15 minutes before the time's up. It can help you manage your thoughts better. It increases your confidence. It makes you more mentally tough, helps you deal with the ups and downs of the game, makes you more motivated. But the one in the middle there, it helps you get in the moment more. Sports psychologists call it experiencing flow. Athletes and coaches know it as being in the zone. And that, for me, is the biggest hook with athletes. It's why athletes put themselves through hell. They ignore their social life. They don't go to parties because they want to be well-rested for the game the next day. They run in frigid weather or, crazy humidity. They go to the gym all the time. They're training all the time. Why? Because those little moments when they're in the zone, you play the game, you've reached it at some point. It is the best feeling in the world. It's where everything slows down and whatever is happening on the field happens perfectly. And you're so focused on what's going on there, it's almost like you can anticipate everything that's going on around you, and you can beat 3 defenders, or nobody's getting by you, or you're a goalkeeper, and your reactions are insanely fast. Why are you able to do all that stuff when you're in the zone? Because you're focused on one thing. All the other noise that our mind tends to create disappears, and we can focus on that one thing, which is the play in front of us. All right, so I'm going to get into Grit a little bit. Another suggestion for books, Grit by Angela Duckworth. I got introduced to it in a really cool way. Evan Nestorak, one of my former players, actually worked in her research lab in Penn. This book was a bestseller. She got Pete Carroll from the Seattle Seahawks consulted with her after she wrote the book because he wanted a gritty team. And so, the line underneath it, I had in my office for a while, greatness courts failure. And so gritty athletes understand that, yeah, I'm going to fail over and over again, but eventually it's going to be worth it. Why is it important? Because a key component of grit is follow through. People who are gritty are able to stick with something, a long-term goal, during the tough times. And so whether the long-term goal is earning a starting spot or moving up from a B to an A team or finishing an AP class or going to grad school, whatever it is, grit determines whether or not you're going to see this to the end or not. Now, other characteristics of grit: hard work, effort, resiliency, passion, discipline, and gritty teams tend to triumph more than skilled teams. And I saw this on full display when I first got to Swarthmore College. 2003, I made the risky move of leaving Strathaven, JV, assistant varsity coach, when we were winning state titles, to go to Swarthmore College, which was the laughingstock of the Centennial Conference. They lost. They were the team in last place every year, but I took a risk. I wanted to coach at the college level. And then right around 2006, 7, 8, we started to turn a corner. We started to beat teams that were more skilled than us. But the reason we were beating them was we knew for a fact no team was going to outwork us. And we started to intimidate other teams because they knew they weren't going, they might be able to pass the ball around us, but we're not going to capitulate. We are going to keep on going and going after them. And so there were times when we won games based on talent we shouldn't have been winning. I'm not going to show it now, but the other thing, theory of competition, if you have time, you may have seen it. It's a really good Nike commercial where, they show all these clips of different athletes succeeding: Ronaldo, Wayne Gretzky, Michael Jordan. They have this guy doing the voiceover, and he basically is talking about grit. He talks about the theory of competition. Sometimes things don't go the way they're supposed to. Sometimes the underdog kicks your ass, and that's what whatchamacallit's about. Oh, wait, what did I do here? So I cannot see. There we go. All right, so some important questions. This is something that I think is important for you to think about with your athletes and kind of questioning them when you're evaluating them. Because if they answer these the right way, well, then you've got a gritty kid. And I'm going to take a gritty athlete over a superstar any day of the week if that superstar is a prima donna. We've seen it at Swarthmore College where we'll get these guys who are great soccer players, but they're not gritty. And, they're the ones who unfortunately tend to be the biggest problem. So questions: how do you respond to fear, failure, mental exhaustion? I'm in the process of watching The Last Dance, Michael Jordan's docuseries. It's fascinating. It's really fun to watch. And I know at some point they're going to get to Game 5 in his last finals against the Jazz, the flu game. And I looked up 38.7 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, and he hits a three-pointer in the last minute to give them the lead, all while experiencing symptoms of the flu. Scottie Pippen's holding him up as they walk off the court. And Michael Jordan, in my opinion, is the ultimate competitor. He's the greatest athlete out there. He was experiencing mental and physical exhaustion, and yet he still played at a high level. So what are your kids doing? How are they when things aren't going good? How good are they when things aren't good? Are they the type of player that when things fall apart, you can't count on them? Then they're not that great. How comfortable are they with discomfort? One of the things that became an ongoing theme last year with my guys at Swarthmore College is crave suffering. Suffering is a huge part of the game of soccer. It is brutal. It is exhausting. I mean, some of the goalies Courtney and I played with at Millersville, they thought we were all crazy because why would you want to be a field player and tire yourself out every game and run 6, 7, 8, 9 miles a game? And I look at the goalies, I'm saying, you guys are the crazy ones doing exercises where you're diving on the ground and beating your body up, 100, 200 times in the span of a half hour. The point is that this game's all about discomfort. Now, I'm not telling my athletes when they're really hurt and they need a break or they need to rest an injury to play through it. I'm talking about the normal wear and tear of the game. When it's the last 10 minutes of the game, yeah, you're uncomfortable. I don't care. Push through it because it's your mind that tells you to take your foot off the gas. Don't listen to it. Nothing. How satisfied are you with being unsatisfied? Being unsatisfied is an okay thing because it'll keep on pushing you. What's your capacity for hard work? How driven are you to prove yourself? Another thing in that Last Dance documentary, Jordan's dad said it, coaches say, if you want to see Michael Jordan at his best, tell him he can't do something. Another book I highly recommend, Jamie Moyer, Just Tell Me I Can't. Jamie Moyer, he was pitching in the major leagues at the age of 49. And, that's amazing. And a big reason was he knew if someone told him he couldn't do something, he was driven to prove them wrong. And the other thing is, ultimately what we're doing as coaches is we're not setting our athletes up for professional careers because the vast majority aren't going. It's just not going to happen. I've been at Swarthmore College for 17 years. We've had like 2 guys play some level of professional sports. So the reality is most of them aren't going to do it. But if we can use soccer as a platform to help them become gritty people, well, then all of a sudden they're doing well in college. They're reaching those goals that make them better people with what they do with their life. All right, I just want to see. Might have to zip through some of these because I'm running out of time. Can grit be developed? All right, let me move my Zoom stuff. Nature versus nurture. 50 years ago, if you were a doctor, a teacher, a psychologist, you took one side of this debate. You said, nope, it's nature why we are the way we are. Genes determine everything about us. Other side of the debate was, nope, it's nurture. It's what the environment we're raised in. And we now know it's a combination of the two. And again, these scientists who figure this out, that genetics account for 30%, 37% of one's perseverance, and 20% of one's passion, according to twin studies. What that basically says is genetics plays a smaller role in whether or not someone's persevering and passionate, whether or not they're gritty. Why do they become gritty? It's their environment. What happens in their life that pushes them, that shapes them to either become soft or to become gritty. The IQ thing, I'll skip through that, and increasing with age, that's not that relevant. But it does say that as people get older, they tend to become a little more gritty. All right, normalize the expected failure that comes with learning something new. Let me just see my notes for 1 second. So I talked about, I teach my athletes at Swarthmore College or in my private practice, I'm going to teach you how to fail the right way. When you try something new, understand failure is a part of it, and it's not a bad thing. So there was this dissertation study that I came across when I was in grad school. It happened in a math class, but it's applicable to sports. So what they did was they had these groups of students and randomly divided them up. So if you gave them IQ tests as groups, they would come out pretty comparable. So it wasn't like one group was much smarter than the other. They were identical in terms of their capacity for learning, and they were identical in terms of their learning experiences in the past. So what they did was they taught these two groups a math lesson that were identical. And the way they taught it in terms of, the lesson planning was the same, but there was one difference. Group A was taught the way we normally teach kids, to basically say that failure's not good. Oh, you're not getting this. Come on, you're not working hard enough. This isn't good. You're going to fail the test. And then the other group was taught failure's supposed to happen during this. This is new. This is hard. You're going to fail. And when you fail, it's okay. Because if you fail and realize it's okay, you'll work harder through that failure. And what they found was the group that was taught failure was okay did better at learning. Their final test results when they were tested on this material was way better than the other group. And they reported enjoying this rigorous, tough learning experience way more than the other group. So, as coaches, I think we can all do a better job of telling our athlete, it's all right to fail. Get back up. You're going to be okay. This failure is going to teach you something. Again, I'm kind of on this Bulls kick, but Phil Jackson's book, 11 Rings, I read a couple years ago. One of the things that I've ingrained in my kind of language as a coach is the gift of the enemy, whether the enemy is the other team or the enemy is a failure. When we fail, when we lose, that other team or that failure gives us a gift, which is, why'd that happen? What did I do wrong and how can I fix it? Let's see. So one of the other things is I have my guys think about when you failed and overcame it, what type of support was the most valuable? I think picking the brains of our players can be really helpful. The other thing is that if we can do a better job of not negatively judging them, it doesn't mean, don't point out their mistakes, but point out their mistakes in an unemotional way. Hey, I've noticed that you keep on going to your left. You're left-footed. In practice, I want to see you go to your right more because it's going to make you less predictable. Versus you keep on going to your left. It's not good enough. When are you going to listen to me? All that kind of stuff. So the last part there, toddlers are free of negative judgment. They're part of their brain that cares about what people think of them. That part of their brain's not even close to being developed. And it's why they're okay, with repeatedly failing. And the best example is when a toddler learns to walk. Toddler learns to walk by failing over and over again. And they're not thinking about, oh, everyone thinks I'm an idiot because I can't walk and I'm never going to be able to. That part of their brain's not working. What do they do when they fall? Even when they skin their knee or bang their chin, they get up and they try again. Keep on failing, and then eventually they learn to walk. Let's see. This one I think is pretty important, the talent bias. On the surface, we tend to say hard work is definitely more important than intelligence, or in terms of sports, hard work is definitely more important than raw talent, raw ability, because I'll take a kid who's going to work hard versus the prima donna any day of the week. So, in a survey, Americans say being hardworking is 5 times more important than intelligence or just natural ability when hiring new people. But the reality is we have this natural bias for talent over hard work. I mean, think about the way Sports Center shows clips. They show those superstars doing amazing things. They're not showing the gritty, outside backs just running and running and running. They're showing, Neymar scoring a brilliant goal. And so what I think is important to take from this is, rather than shining the brightest light on those highlight reel plays, which are not going to happen very often, shine a brighter light on that one player who has busted his ass over and over again to learn a certain skill or worked super hard to bring up their fitness. If you're shining a brighter light on that and praising that more, well, then all of a sudden you're going to have a group of players that are way more gritty, because ultimately they do want your praise. And if they're getting praise for their hard work, something they always have control over, well, then you've got 11 guys or girls on the field that are real hard working. Talent versus achievement. I have this little graphic here. The one thing that I just want to point out about it is you look at these these little equations. Talent plus effort equals skill, and skill plus effort equals achievement. But in both of those things, you have effort is one of the most important things. We always have control over how hard we work. We don't have control over the mistakes all the time. We're going to have a bad touch. We're going to, miss a pass because it's not heavy enough, or it's, too heavy. And so, again, focusing attention on effort and hard work. In Ensign Dorrance, I came across this quote. He was referred to quite a bit in the book Grit. Talent is common. What you invest to develop talent is a critical final measure of greatness. So, investing to develop talent takes hard work. Let me just see how many more slides I have. All right, getting close to the end. This one real quick is just, neuroplasticity. Our brain can grow. Our brain can change. Our brain is like a muscle. And so visualization is something that I introduce all my clients to. There used to be a thought of when we lose brain cells, they're gone forever. Research is showing that's not true. When you do something over and over again, what happens is those neurons that required to operate, to do that thing, get stronger and stronger. They happen more automatically. It's why there's a thing called muscle memory. A kid taking a penalty shot over and over and over again can hit the side panel over and over again because those neurons in his brain are so powerful. And here's the thing with visualization. So what I encourage all athletes to do is visualize. Think about those good things that they want to do on the field. Do that over and over again. Because let's say it's a penalty shot. When I go to take a penalty shot, the neurons in my brain fire in a certain pattern. And I take that shot over and over again, so those neurons fire over. And so I have muscle memory now. If I visualize that same penalty shot, those same neurons are firing. So you're actually practicing without doing the physical thing. And then the other added benefit is if you're visualizing doing these great things on the field, anxiety comes down, confidence starts to go up. So the other part of this book, it references Carol Dweck. A lot of her information is making its way into education. It was developed for the business world, but it's also great for athletes. So a growth mindset is the idea that I'm not there yet. I can get a little bit better. I just need to work at it. A fixed mindset is this is the way I am. This is the way I'm always going to be. Someone with a fixed mindset, they fail and it crushes them. Someone with a growth mindset, they fail. It doesn't feel good, but they think, okay, I just got to keep on going. And it's those athletes who look at their development of, I just want to be a little bit better than I was yesterday. And these are just some ways to communicate with your athletes that can, undermine grit or promote grit when you're giving them information. All right, let me just see what else I have. So hope is, it sounds kind of cheesy, but it's really an important thing. A quote that I use all the time: optimism is only an asset when paired with a strong sense of reality. So you don't want kids being completely unrealistic and thinking they may be the worst player on the team, thinking that they should be starting, striker or whatever. But if you have that strong sense of reality, optimism is huge. Let me see. Yeah, this stuff is, you guys can look over this on your own. The last thing about grit is just some suggestions on how to promote it. I have to move this thing. So having them explore interests, it's a first step in developing a passion. Most of the kids that you're working with are already there. They already know their passion because they're playing for one of the better clubs. Gritty athletes embrace feedback. They don't shy away from it. So when you're correcting a player and you see them getting down, pull them aside and say, hey, this feedback's important. It's a blueprint for success. This is what you need to work on if you want to crack the starting lineup or if you want to get more playing time. Way to have a gritty team. You have a team that values both short-term success as well as long-term learning and growth. I said before, don't shine the brightest light on time. talent, shine the brightest light on hard work. You'll get more out of them. You'll see more development. Be tough and loving. So if you look at those two terms on a spectrum, stay away from the edges. You can't be too tough with no loving, but you can't be too loving with none of the tough. You have to be, a little bit tough at times. You have to be a little bit nurturing at times. Let me see. So that's it for the slides. The other thing, I'll end on this. It's my cheesy horse metaphor story, because I know I experience it all the time with players who are starting to fall apart psychologically. So let me tell the story first. So there's this guy, he's in his 50s and he's a farmer, has a tough life, but he's doing fine. And he's had this area of land in his family for a couple generations now. And him, his wife, and his 22-year-old son. And he has to work hard, but things are okay. His son does a ton on the farm. And one day he goes out and he realizes that his one horse, his only horse that does the majority of the work, is missing. And he looks out in the fencing area beyond the barn, and there's a broken part in the fence, and he concludes the horse is gone. It ran away. Neighbor comes over and tells him that he's the most unlucky farmer ever. His farm's going to fall apart. Things stink. And he goes, maybe. Next day, him and his son are doing work. They look off in the distance. They see the horse, and with it, two wild horses. They wrangle them in, get them, fix the fence. Neighbor comes over and says, you're the luckiest guy ever. You now have three horses. Your farm's going to thrive. You're going to make a lot of money. You're the luckiest guy ever. And his response is, maybe. Following day, son's trying to tame one of the wild horses, gets thrown off, breaks his leg. Neighbor comes over, sees his leg in a cast, says, you were screwed last time. Now you're really screwed. You're going to have to sell your farm to the bank. You're not going to be able to pay your bills because your son helped you keep this afloat. You're done. And he said, maybe. Next day, Army recruiters show up, and they're taking men straight from their homes to the front line of this violent war where most of them are being killed. They see this kid in a leg and with his leg in a cast, and they say, you're no good to us, and they leave him alone, and they're on their way. The farmer, the neighbor comes over and says, luckiest guy ever, your son would have been killed. Now he's going to live. Farmer's response is maybe. So I tell this to a lot of my clients. I'm like, do you know what the point is? And they kind of stare at me blankly like, no, I don't get it. I say, it's the impermanence of life. Everything's always changing. Think about you as an athlete where you were 3 years ago. Think about how much better you've gotten. You're always going to change. You're like, but why are you telling me this? I said, because the same is true with your emotions. When you make a mistake on the field, those negative experiences get stuck to our brain like Velcro. But just remember, that bad game and you feel like crap right now, it's permanent. You will bounce back. And that story can be one of those things that helps athletes stay gritty. Start to realize, okay, things are bad now, but things will improve. I'll get back on track. I just got to work that much harder in practice. I got to get in the gym more. For our guys, I got to watch a little more videotape to understand things better. And so if they can start understanding that emotionally, it will change. It will get better. You'll be all right. Well, then all of a sudden you have those real hardworking players, and they go through a rough patch, but that they're going to come back even stronger. All right, I think I've rambled on enough. Any questions that you guys may have had? Is there anything that didn't make sense, or you want me to elaborate on, or just specifics with athletes that you're dealing with that you want to pick my brain a little bit? All right, we're all shy.
I would, number one, thank you, Ciaran, for hopping on with us tonight. And I guess the coach's role and the parents' role in developing kids. Do you have any suggestions on how that looks like, particularly when they're in a very weak moment?
Are we talking about the parents that are a little out of control?
Not me specifically.
it's one of those things. It's one of the reasons why I made the jump from Strathaven to Swarthmore. So I didn't have to deal with it. I mean, because parents were coming up to me and chewing me out on the sideline because I wasn't giving their kid enough playing time. What I suggest is read The Coddling of the American Mind. This gets into it big time. And I mean, I'm sure you guys see it tremendously where you have a kid who's unhappy with their playing time and mom, dad yanks him from the team to move on to the next club because you guys are idiots. You don't know what you're talking about. And so, you know, it's a hard thing to do in the moment when everybody's heated. Don't even bother. Let them say their point. One way that I describe this is the ineffectiveness of arguing. Because if you get into an argument with a parent, arguing is one of the least effective ways to communicate. Because, Courtney, if you and I start arguing about who the greatest player of all time is, you're going to say your points about, let's say you choose Ronaldo, and when you're saying that, I'm not listening to what you have to say because I'm thinking about what I'm going to say about Messi. So neither of us are really hearing each other. So avoid arguments at all costs. I mean, I know different clubs have the policies of, you know, can't contact a coach within 12, 24 hours after a game. I think that's good stuff. But, you know, when you do have like workshops or conversations with parents, try and get them to see that failure's not bad. Your kid not succeeding is not the end of the world. It's actually a really valuable thing because, you know, if you want a kid to grow up to be ineffective and, you know, can't handle adversity, you know, here's a good way to think about it. The book, The Coddling of the American Mind, starts with this quote: "You prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child." You have these issues. It started off with helicopter parents buzzing around. They became lawnmower parents, making a nice path. Now it's bulldozer parents. When I was at Rowan, I heard stories about, you know, mom and dad buying or renting an apartment on campus to do laundry for their adult child, or calling college professors saying, but my kid worked really hard, but they still got a C. It wasn't good enough. They've got to work harder. So, you know, I think it can be helpful when you kind of have those introductory stuff. You're welcoming parents into the club to kind of take those bits and pieces from The Coddling of the American Mind and kind of embed it into your philosophy of, listen, there are going to be times when your son or daughter is unhappy with playing time. There will be times when you're unhappy with it. We're not doing it out of favoritism. We try to be as objective as possible. We want to develop every player in a certain way. There are going to be times when we're playing your son or daughter in a specific role that they might not be happy with. There are going to be times when we're in really important games where we're playing the best players the majority of the game. When that happens, if your kid's not on the field, you've got to send a message of, okay, if you're not happy with it, don't run away to another club. Figure out a way to change your situation. And so if you can kind of lay the foundation early on with that and plant those seeds into the parents' heads early on, well, then all of a sudden they might be more willing to hear you out when things are calm and saying, hey, you know, your son missed 3 practices in the past 2 weeks. I don't want to reward him because right now he's not very committed. There may have been good reason, but I've got to send a message to the whole team. Or, you know, your daughter her attitude hasn't been good. You know, you're able to give them that feel. This is what they need to improve if they want to change their situation. I mean, it's a fine line to walk, and being in the college system, I don't envy your position at all.
So, Ciaran, hi, this is Rob Elliott. It's when I listen to this. First of all, thanks for putting this presentation together. It's got my brain spinning about the environment or culture that we create within our teams, and you know, I think we've touched on the coach's role, the player's role, the parent's role. You know, everyone's role in that have input in culture. So it's just interesting to me that obviously the leadership starts to drive culture, but everyone that is in that environment contributes or takes away from that culture. So in order to create that right level of competitiveness and nurturing, I think it's important that the more this gets out there, that people are aware of this, and we're all, we all have a piece in creating this culture.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because culture has become one of these buzzwords, which I think is used too much, but it is so incredibly valuable. And we did a complete culture overhaul at Swarthmore College. So my time there, we were terrible. We worked our way up. We started winning conference championships, going to the NCAA tournament. At one point in 2010, we were ranked #1 in the country in Division III soccer. We were the elite team in the area, in the country. And then and the main reason, hard work. The guys embraced grit and hard work and selflessness, and that's why we were good. Even when we were #1 in the country, we weren't the most talented team, but we were the best team. And what happened was we lost sight of that. We started seeing, oh, we're that good. What we started doing was recruiting Division I cast-offs, kids that were Division I talent, but not getting recruited. And we're like, oh, this kid's amazing. We're going to bring him in. They weren't being recruited Division I. Why? Because they were a problem. They were prima donnas. They thought they could just show up to Swarthmore, Division III, I'm a Division I player, and be given a starting position. And they didn't know how to work hard. They were selfish. And so there was a window from like 2013, 14, 15, 16, where we struggled. We missed the conference playoffs for a while because we had the wrong culture. We had players that didn't want to work hard, and as a coaching staff, we valued that. So there was this huge disconnect. The reality was, I didn't like the players. They didn't like me and the rest of the coaching staff, and it was miserable. So I said to Coach Wagner, at the end of one season, I'm like, we've got to change things. And he's like, yeah, it's not going well. I said, because if we don't change things significantly, I'm not doing this that much longer. It's not worth it. It's not fun anymore. And he's like, he goes, you're the psychologist. I'm all in. You got to figure this out. So I did a lot of work with him to change the culture. And it started with our most important values, hard work, brotherhood and family, and competition. So you're going to work hard every day. And so when we had those prima donnas, we set the tone early in spring one year. So we only have about a month to train in the spring, and our time's limited on the field because of NCAA rules. And we told the guys at the end of the season, we said, things are changing. You better come back in shape. If you don't, there's going to be an issue. And we did the Cooper test, and some of the guys, most of them didn't pass. They didn't run 2 miles in under 12 minutes. We didn't touch a soccer ball at all that spring. It was all fitness. And guess what? We had like 3 guys quit. Good. See ya. They quit. They didn't want to be a part of it because they couldn't handle it. And guess what? They may have been one of our best players, but if you don't want to put in the hard work, I don't care how good you are. So over the next couple of years, we said hard work. And so they started to get the picture. They started to do the work on their own. But I think the most important thing was that idea of family, like kind of brother. We are a family. You signed on to play at Swarthmore College for the next 4 years. We're the closest thing you have to family. You're going to spend more time with us than anybody else. We need to make it feel like a family. So we put a lot of time and effort into the relationships with those guys. I don't know how often I tell the guys on the team that I love them and I can't wait to hang out with them. I mean, we're doing Zoom meetings now, and I start every time with, I miss you guys so much. It sucks that we can't be on campus right now finishing up our spring semester. And and when they're really struggling, forget about the soccer stuff. I'm pulling them in. I'm like, what's going on? You're not yourself. And they start telling me about their issues with their girlfriends or struggling in the classroom. And I don't even address soccer. But what that does is it builds a bond. And guess what? Now all of a sudden they're willing to run through a brick wall. They're willing to say, I think I should be the starting central midfielder, but you're playing me left back. If that's what you guys think's best for the team, I'm going to do it, because they start to have trust in us. Back when we were struggling, they didn't trust us at all, and we didn't trust them, and there were a lot of reasons. So the idea of culture, like thinking about those things that are laying the foundation for your culture, like I said, the hard work, the grit, family, whatever it is. But I do think at the heart of it, I think that idea of relationships is paramount. It's so important. You'll see it at the professional level where the coach is here and the players are here, or vice versa, and that team may be the best team in the league and they fail miserably. And so when you can have a group of guys or girls who are all bought in, all working toward the same things, when they become unhappy, they're, okay, I'll get through this. It's worth it because I want to be a part of it. So, yeah, culture is huge. And it just doesn't – it can happen organically, but what I suggest, put effort into it. The leadership group, talk about it. Make it concrete. Make it written. Get feedback from everyone, and then you disseminate that information to the coaches and figure out ways to make sure that these ideas and these concepts are being hit on all the time. And it's not just lip service. It's not just something that, you roll out at the beginning of the year and then you forget about, within 3 practices. Anybody else have questions or ideas or anything else that I could help you guys with?
I would just say, are there, you mentioned like listening to a song, like, are there any pre-game rituals, that you come across that are interesting?
Yeah, there's, so I have to be a psychologist nerd here. Pavlov's dog. If you took any psychologist class, you've heard of Pavlov and his famous experiments on classical conditioning. So the research was, he had dogs in his lab, and what he did was he had people say ringing bell, but this is what a nerd I am. It was actually a ticking metronome. And so he would set off this ticking metronome, which would make a constant sound, and then he would pour meat powder on the dog's tongue, and the dogs would start to salivate. And he would pair those two things over and over again. And then eventually the metronome would start going, making the noise, and dogs would have that natural sound. They would just start salivating. If you have a pet at home and you go to the one cabinet where their food is around dinner time and you open it up, they come running. That's classical conditioning. So I thought about this like 10 years ago at Swarthmore College, because what we were seeing was we had this kind of upward trajectory during the season, which is normal, but Swarthmore is grueling, not only in the soccer season, but academically. And then around midterms, we'd have this drop. And so what I did was I took Pavlov's concept and I applied it to, and we've done it every year. So we go into the team room, Wagner gives a starting lineup and his main coaching points, and then the rest of the coaches leave, and it's me and the team, and we stand in a circle, arms around each other, and I pick one song every year. And the song has to have kind of a build up to it. If there's a term called frisson, it's when you hear songs and they build up to that kind of crescendo, it feels like an adrenaline rush. And so, I pick a song like that that's kind of up tempo, kind of your pump up song, and I play it before every game, and it's the same song for an entire season. And the idea is this: in the beginning of the year, those guys are already salivating. They just want to get out on the field. They're done with preseason. They're done playing each other. They just want to play another opponent. And so they're all ready to go. They're all pumped up, and they hear that song. And they do this over and over again, and they start associating subconsciously that song with that frame of mind, so that when we get to midterms at the end of the season, when they're tired, they're worn out, they're beat up, they've been pulling all-nighters, they hear that song, something clicks in their brain, and then they're ready to go. So the idea is for athletes to develop these kind of routines to get them in the right frame of mind. Music is a really powerful one. Most of my athletes do it. Another example would be from Jamie Moyer's book. One of the things that he did before every game was he would take an index card and he would divide it into a grid, 100 little squares, and he would randomly write 1 to 100 in all the squares. And he would find an empty janitor closet somewhere secluded every day he was pitching, and he would pull this card out, and it was different every time, and he would have to go and search 1 to 100 and get through that. And what he was actually doing was an example of mindfulness. He was focusing on just one thing. He was forgetting about the pressure and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing that he was doing was that he was improving his ability to focus on one thing at a time. And so those are two examples of things that athletes can do to kind of get them in the right frame of mind. And what I would suggest to the parents that you work with, if they ever ask about that, because parents can be the biggest enemies pregame. Because sometimes their pregame is, this is what you need to do. If you don't do this, this is going to be a problem. Have the parents just ask the kid, hey, on the car ride to the game or to practice, what do you need from me? Do you want to talk about things? Do you need me to shut up? What do you need me to do? And, get the advice from the player. They'll tell you what they need. And on the flip side, these two college baseball coaches, like 50 years of experience between them, did all this research in northwest of the country, and they found out the worst part of an athlete's experience, most common worst part, car ride home. Why? Mom, dad are screaming and yelling at them for the mistakes they made. So I use my son Jack as an example. Don't hold it against him. He's playing for Nether. I apologize. But, people ask me, what's a car ride home like for you and Jack? Ciaran, you've been coaching at the college level for 17 years. You must be really giving him tons of information. I said, after a game? No way. And they're like, why not? I said, I let him dictate that. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, after every game, I say to Jack, I'm like, so? And he knows what that means. And he's like, okay. I'm like, what do you need? He's like, well, I said, do you want to talk about a mistake and the good stuff? So our common routine is, what was the biggest problem on the field and how do you want to fix it? And there's no emotion attached to it. And then I say, give me 5 things that went really well. And that's that kind of 80-20 rule. But then there are other times when I'm like, do you want to talk about it? And there's sometimes like, yeah. He's like, I want to talk about this, and all right, let's go. So I'm going to give you some. And then other times he's like, nope. And then that's when some of the parents that I know from Nether, like, that's when you really need to talk to him, right? Because he's in the bad frame of mind. You're the sports psychologist. I'm like, no. They're like, why not? I said, because in my line of work, I've seen the fallout from, it's called a fractured relationship. I have plenty of kids who are great athletes who come to see me as a psychologist who hate the game. They're the best player on their team and they hate it. Why? Because their mom and dad destroyed it for them. Because they ripped them apart in the car ride them. You're not good enough. You're sluggish. You need to do this. You're not working hard enough. Whatever. They already feel bad if they had a bad game. They don't need me. My son and daughter don't need me to pile on them. So and so I'll say, okay, we're not talking about it. And then every once in a while, if I'm like, if he was really dogging it because he did a sleepover the night before, I'm like, all right, we're not talking about it now. We'll talk about it in an hour. And it's very brief. It's like, Jack, you weren't yourself out there. You slept over at so-and-so's. What time did you go to bed? He's like, yeah, we got to bed late. Okay, lesson learned. Sleep's important, right? Let's move on from it. So kind of giving that information to parents can be helpful. And here's the other thing. When you're dealing with parents as a coach, you have to realize it's out of your control. You can give them the information and try and influence them. That's what you should be doing. Like the car ride home stuff. I don't know how many parents have really been like, wow, I'm that jerk parent. Thank you for, bringing that to my attention. But then I've had plenty of parents who are like, I'm not listening to that guy. I know what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, it's out of my control. I can't force them to parent their kids the right way. I'll tell you a very quick story. We did a 4-on-4 tournament for years at Swarthmore College, ages like 8 to 14, fundraiser. We had this coach who was out of control. Not only screaming at his own 8-year-old players, but screaming at my guys who, they're not referees, they're college players. They're going to make mistakes. So after one game, I pulled him down and say, hey, you got to stop your yelling. And he kind of like started drawing back. And I'm like, listen, stop yelling at my players. They're just trying to do a good job. They're not perfect. Stop saying anything to them. You're not allowed to do that. And I'm just suggesting, stop yelling at your own players. Well, what? That's how my coach coached me and I turned out fine. And I literally looked at him and said, you turned out fine. You're screaming like a lunatic at 8-year-olds. That's not fine. But he kept on doing it and it was out of my control. So rather than, getting frustrated, angry, whatever, okay, it's out of my control. I did what I could and, and I'm sure you guys experience that all the time with parents. And it's, and if you try and hold on to that control and you let that frustration kind of fester with you, it takes the joy out of coaching. Realize they're going to do their own thing. You give them the information, you give them advice, and then it's up to them to decide what they want to do with it.
Yeah, that's applicable I feel like that's applicable for a lot of things, not just coaching, but working, parenting, all of it.
Oh, I mean, Jack's 10, Addison's 7. Addison proved to me when she was fine that I didn't have any control. She's got it all figured out. Now I'm going to influence her because she's my daughter. But hey, let them make mistakes. Let them fail. Let go of all that control. It's not gonna get you anywhere.
Mm.
Anything else?
Anybody?
No. Thanks, Key.
So my little plug is, if you have any athletes who you feel would benefit from working with me, send them my way. It is so bizarre with coronavirus right now, but I am doing online therapy. We all have to, but I am still seeing clients in my office. So if they're interested, have them give me a call. Parents usually start off with, this is what's going on. Tell me what you would do. And I give them my approach with cognitive behavior therapy and mindfulness and all that kind of stuff. And then we just kind of take it from there.
Cool. Well, we are gonna, we're gonna record this and, send it out to our membership so they can watch it. So thank you very much. Thank you. You can see, I know, John and Pi and James, they all chimed in and said thank you so much. Really
Great.
really.
Anytime. And again, if you guys like this and you want more of it, I said it in the beginning, I'm a huge psychology nerd. I mean, I could probably put something together for you based strictly on the coddling of the American mind that would benefit you guys. But if that's down the road, if you'd be interested, I'd be more than happy to help you guys out.
Perfect.
Thanks, Key.
Right.
We
All
really
right.
Awesome.
appreciate it, man.
Yep.
Thank you.
See ya. Take care.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.